He was invited. He arrived. But he never took his seat. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Comment below. Where are you listening from right now? I always look forward to hearing from you. I was exactly halfway through an excellent ham sandwich and a chapter of a particularly uninspired mystery novel when the doorbell rang. That wasn't odd. What was odd was that Fritz wasn't answering it, even though it was his jurisdiction between 11 and 1. And even odder, Wolfe shouted, "Archie!" through the closed office door not 3 seconds later. Now, Wolfe doesn't like shouting. He thinks it cheapens a room's acoustics. He also doesn't like surprises, interruptions, or most living people, so when he voluntarily calls me before I've made it to the door, I pay attention. I opened it to find a man in a charcoal wool coat with a brushed velvet collar and one of those smiles that wants you to notice it but doesn't particularly care if you do. The smile was the only thing warm about him. Everything else, his coat, his voice, and his eyes, was the business end of a paperweight. "Archie Goodwin," he said, giving it the cadence of a question and a court summons. "You're lucky," I told him. "I only answer to one of those." He extended a gloved hand. The leather was unscuffed and black enough to reflect. "I have an appointment with Mr. Wolfe." "You and half of New York's troublemakers," I said, but stepped aside. He didn't remove his coat. He didn't sit on the red chair in the hall. He stood there like he was measuring the air. Inside the office, Wolfe had already lowered himself into the custom-built throne he called a desk chair and arranged his bulk with the grace of a man who believed the world owed him convenience. "Name?" Wolfe asked, not looking up from the orchid catalogue he had no intention of ordering from. "Julian Ashcroft," said the guest. "My card." He produced one. Wolfe let it sit on the desk like it might ask him for a favor. "Mr. Ashcroft?" Wolfe said. "What do you want?" There's a way Wolfe says that which makes it clear he doesn't mean it politely. I took my seat to the left, as usual, pen ready though the man hadn't asked for a consultation yet. Ashcroft's smile made a small, precise shift. "It's not what I want, Mr. Wolfe. It's what I need to prevent." Wolfe didn't blink. "You are neither the police nor a woman in tears. That's not usually the category of client that gets that far." "Nevertheless," Ashcroft said, finally removing one glove with the kind of deliberation that should come with a soundtrack, "a situation has developed at my club. Something private. Something that needs containment more than justice." "Go to your board," Wolfe said. "Or a discreet attorney." "I can't," Ashcroft said. "The matter involves someone who is neither a member nor a guest. Someone who, according to the logs, was never there. But something valuable disappeared. Something unnameable, but consequential." That got Wolfe's attention, barely. He tilted his head half an inch. "An intangible theft? You might say that." I broke in. "You're being cute, Mr. Ashcroft. If you don't want us to know what's missing, and you don't want to press charges, and you don't want it known you came here, what do you want?" Ashcroft glanced at me like I was a chess piece in the wrong game. Discretion, observation, and prevention. Wolfe closed the orchid catalogue. That's about the equivalent of a drum roll in his world. "You will speak plainly," he said, "or you will leave." Ashcroft hesitated. Then there was a guest, invited informally. No records, no introduction. They were never seen seated, never signed in, never addressed directly. But they were seen. A shadow, if you like. The following day, a member resigned, 2 staff were dismissed, and an unsigned letter arrived at my home. "And you want us to—" "What?" I asked. "Find your ghost." Ashcroft stood. "I want you to help me make sure they never return." He placed a crisp envelope on Wolfe's blotter. "Everything you'll need is inside, except, of course, the truth." Without another word, he turned and left, not even brushing the chair he'd refused to sit in. I looked at Wolfe. Well, I'll say this for him. He's got style. Wolfe grunted. He also didn't sit down, I said, which makes him the first client we've had who delivered a mystery standing up. Wolfe didn't reply. He opened the envelope slowly, as if expecting it to bite. His eyes moved once, then again. Then he looked up. "Pfui," he said. "This is going to be intolerable." Which meant, of course, that we were taking the case. The following morning began with Fritz sulking over the eggs. I don't mean they were bad. They were, as usual, perfect, fluffy, seasoned with a whisper of chervil, and accompanied by toast that had never seen the inside of a box. But Fritz was rattled, and it had nothing to do with yolks. "Mr. Ashcroft called," he informed me, his posture as rigid as the silver spoon in the grapefruit bowl. "He's arriving at 11, with a guest." I paused, mid-toast. "Another one?" I asked. "We haven't even finished sanitizing the air from the last visit." Fritz sniffed. He requested that the library be prepared, not the office. That got my attention. Wolfe doesn't like hosting anywhere but the office, and even then the seats are spaced like a courtroom with the judge expecting perjury. The library? That was unheard of. That was sacred. That was where Wolfe did two things: read and sulk. He considered both private rituals. Did he say why? No. Which meant either Wolfe had told him to, which I doubted, or Ashcroft was making a move Wolfe wasn't going to like. At 10:30, Wolfe descended from the plant rooms wearing the canary yellow silk cravat he usually reserves for guests he's already decided not to like. He went directly to the office and began rearranging his blotter with the grim precision of a man preparing for surgery. "I do not intend to entertain him in the library," he said when I appeared in the doorway. "I do not intend to entertain him anywhere." I waited. He didn't elaborate. I take it the envelope didn't reveal much. He gave me a look. It revealed more than Mr. Ashcroft intended. The handwriting on the letter was traced, poorly, but it bore indentation patterns from a second page. The paper itself came from a boutique stationer in Gramercy. The signature was absent, but the envelope's seal, imitation wax, carried a partial monogram, C.A. I whistled. That's a lot of noticing for someone who only glanced at it once. "I glanced twice," he corrected. Before I could respond, the bell rang. Wolfe didn't move. I answered the door to find Ashcroft once again standing tall, gloved and composed, with a woman half a step behind him wearing the kind of suit that cost more than my annual wardrobe and heels, sharp enough to slice motive from alibi. She had dark hair, pinned back without a strand out of place, and eyes that registered me and dismissed me before I'd finished blinking. "This is Cordelia Avery," Ashcroft said. "She's the reason I'm here." I made a non-committal noise and led them to the office, not the library. Wolfe didn't rise, didn't nod, didn't speak. He simply looked. Cordelia Avery didn't sit either. Instead, she stood with one hand resting lightly on the back of the red chair, but made no move to occupy it. "Miss Avery?" Wolfe said. "Why are you here?" She smiled. "To explain what Mr. Ashcroft will not." Wolfe turned his gaze to Ashcroft, who was adjusting his cuffs like a man waiting for applause that hadn't arrived. Cordelia took a step forward. "There was a gathering at the Dorchester Club 4 nights ago. Private. 15 guests, all men except for one woman. She wasn't on the list. She wasn't expected. She stayed no more than an hour." "She?" I asked. "So this isn't you?" "No," Cordelia said. "But I was the reason she came." I didn't catch Wolfe's reaction because he gave none, but I knew something had clicked. I saw his eyes do the thing they do when a puzzle starts to align itself, silently, behind the curtain of his brain. "She left something behind," Cordelia said. "A recording," Ashcroft added quietly. "Or what might be one." "She walked through the hall, the salon, the library," Cordelia said. "She said nothing, carried nothing. But the next morning someone received an audio file. Private conversations, taken out of context. Threats made in jest. Boasts made in confidence. all stitched together and sent anonymously. Wolfe's fingers drummed once on the arm of his chair. He detests recordings, surveillance, anything that mimics his own precision without his control. "And," he said. "And now," Ashcroft said, "the woman, whoever she was, has sent a message. She will return." I looked at them both. "You want us to find a ghost with a microphone?" Cordelia didn't smile. "We want to know if she has allies, if someone inside the club helped her, if someone gave her access." Wolfe closed his eyes, briefly. "You are concerned less with exposure than with control." "Precisely," Ashcroft said. "And the recording?" "Partial," Cordelia said. "Edited. There's more." "Of course," Wolfe said. "There always is." He opened his eyes. "Mr. Goodwin will attend the club this evening. You will supply a guest pass." Ashcroft nodded, though his mouth twitched at the edges. "Bring no recording equipment, Archie," Wolfe added. "Use your eyes." That was fine with me. I trust my eyes more than wires, and besides, I don't like being sued. Ashcroft and Cordelia made for the door, neither looking back. Just before she stepped out, Cordelia turned. "There's one more thing," she said. "The woman, she never sat down. Not once. She left." The door closed. I turned to Wolfe. "You believe any of it?" "I believe they're scared. Of a recording. Of what it might reveal." "About them?" Wolfe didn't answer. He shifted his weight slightly, and for him, that was a paragraph. "There's something else," he said. "Miss Avery's handbag was closed when she arrived. It was unzipped when she left. The teeth didn't align. Someone in this room now carries something they didn't come in with." "You think she took something?" "No," Wolfe said. "She added something." He waved a finger at the side table where Ashcroft had placed his gloves. "Left, briefly, when he went to the hall to take a phone call before leaving. They were resting beside the decanter. I stepped over, looked. Tucked just beneath the gloves, barely visible unless you knew it was there, was a slip of cream-colored card. No name. Just a time and a word. Midnight. Cassiopeia. I held it up. "What's Cassiopeia?" I asked. "A constellation," Wolfe said. "And in certain circles, a room, underground, private, very private." He pressed his fingertips together. "Go," he said. "Make yourself welcome." "And if I'm not?" He closed his eyes again. "Then you'll be precisely where I need you to be." I headed out with my coat and my cynicism, both fully buttoned. Wolfe had let something into the brownstone. He hadn't stopped them. And that meant, in his own way, he just sat up straighter, which meant trouble was coming, and for once, it wasn't going to knock. The Cassiopeia room didn't appear on any club brochure, and the concierge didn't acknowledge it when I asked, which, of course, told me everything I needed to know. The Dorchester Club is the kind of place where even the marble feels reserved. A man in a navy blazer with silver buttons escorted me through a hallway lined with portraits of founders who all looked allergic to smiling, down a set of stairs that smelled faintly of lemon oil and generational wealth, and paused in front of an unmarked wooden door with an inlaid star pattern. "No phones," he said. "No names. If anyone asks, you were never here." I gave him a cheerful nod. That's usually how my relationships end. Inside, the Cassiopeia room was the love child of a jazz club and a confession booth. Low lighting. Leather seats arranged in curves, not rows. A bar that didn't have a menu. Just a man in suspenders and a bow tie who seemed to already know what you wanted. Music played from invisible speakers. Something with horns and regret. There were perhaps a dozen people, all paired off, quiet, focused inward. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and secrets. No one looked up when I entered. I made a circuit of the room, casual as a man looking for a dropped cufflink. I wasn't here to interrogate anyone. Not yet. My job was to see who was uncomfortable with my presence and how they tried to hide it. I sat near the back where I could see the entire room without being in it. That's an old trick. One Wolfe taught me early. Don't center yourself until you know who the performance is for. 10 minutes passed. A woman entered alone, tall, graceful, wearing a pale blue coat over black silk. She moved like she'd been here before, but didn't want it known. She took a seat by the wall and ordered something neat and brown from the bartender with a glance. No words. I noted her hands. No jewelry. Short, square-cut nails. A long vertical scar down her left thumb. Looked like an old burn. She didn't speak to anyone. A man followed shortly after. Heavy-set. Florid face. Nervous eyes. He paused just inside the door and surveyed the room too long. He didn't sit. Didn't order. He turned on his heel and left after less than 30 seconds, which meant he came here looking for someone, didn't find them, and bailed. Or maybe he did find them, and left anyway. That's when I noticed the bartender watching me. He was good. Quiet hands, calm eyes. But he watched the room with the same casual calculation I used, taking in who sat where, how long they lingered, what they drank, and whether they looked over their shoulder before they left. He made his way over with a towel draped over one arm, placed a low ball of something smoky and amber on the table, and said, "Compliments of the woman at the bar." I glanced her way. She hadn't moved. Her face didn't register recognition. She wasn't smiling. She didn't even look my way. "Does she come here often?" I asked him. He gave me a professional shrug. Names aren't exchanged in Cassiopeia, and regulars don't ask. I sipped. It was Japanese whiskey. Subtle, rich, too expensive for an accident. "She always drink. Alone?" I asked. "She never finishes her drink," he said, and returned to the bar. I let another half-hour pass, making mental notes of comings and goings, gestures, silences. Then I stood and made for the door. Just as I reached it, I heard a voice behind me. "Next time, wear a different tie." I turned. The woman in the pale blue coat was still facing forward, looking at her glass. "I didn't know there was a dress code," I said. "There isn't," she said. "But you're being watched." "By who?" She looked up then, and I caught it, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the flicker of humor behind calculation. "Not who. Why?" She stood, smoothed her coat. "You're not here for the whiskey, and you're not here for the music. You're very observant." "So are you." I gave her my card. Clean, neutral, just the name. She didn't take it. Instead, she said, "Ask Mr. Wolfe about the Danbury letter." Then she left. I returned to the brownstone a little after 1 a.m. Fritz let me in with the look of a man holding back a lecture on punctuality and digestive timing. Wolfe was still in his chair, surrounded by the aroma of chamomile and disapproval. "Well," he said. "It's a playground for secrets," I said, removing my coat. "She was there." He raised an eyebrow. "She?" "The woman who sent the drink. Pale blue coat, burned scar on her thumb. Knew I wasn't part of the furniture." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Describe her features." I did. He nodded once. "Cassiopeia," he murmured. "Of course. You recognize her." "Number, but I recognize the effect. She's a messenger. They always leave before you think to ask the right question. She told me to ask about the Danbury letter." That did it. Wolfe sat up half an inch, a seismic shift for the man. "She said that?" Verbatim. He muttered something under his breath in German, then rang for beer. I waited. "The Danbury letter," he said, once the bottle was opened and the glass 3/4 full, "was a private document written in 1967 by Senator Aldous Danbury. It never saw the light of day. It detailed improprieties involving a charitable trust, one that financed selective political campaigns under the pretense of educational funding. So blackmail material. Essentially. And what does this have to do with Ashcroft? The Dorchester Club receives donations through a shell organization once affiliated with the Danbury Trust. I let that settle. So someone unearthed the letter, or fragments of it, possibly references, enough to suggest it still exists, enough to scare men like Ashcroft. I thought of the woman in the coat. You think she's got it? No, Wolfe said, but she's connected to someone who does, and they're testing the water. To see how far they can push, to see who's willing to pay. I sank into the red chair, letting the silence fill the room. You think Ashcroft knows? Wolfe gave me a flat look. Ashcroft fears, which is not the same as knowing. So what's our next step? He leaned back, steepling his fingers. We need to know who received that original recording, the one Cordelia mentioned. That's the axis. Should I press Ashcroft? Number he'll lie. And badly. But Miss Avery, she will know whom the recording was meant to ruin. Call her. Tell her Wolfe has agreed to help, but not blindly. I stood. And if she hangs up? Wolfe sipped his beer. Then she's not afraid enough yet. But she will be. And just like that, the board shifted. We weren't looking for a thief. Not anymore. We were looking for a saboteur with perfect timing, and possibly perfect motives. Cordelia Avery didn't answer her phone the first time I called, or the second. On the third try, she picked up with a tone that made it sound like I'd interrupted a meeting between enemies. Goodwin. Still me, I said. Still calling from the brownstone. Still the man with access to the one person who can help you out of a very expensive, very quiet disaster. Silence. Then, I don't appreciate pressure. That's mutual, but here we are. Mr. Wolfe has agreed to help, but he wants the truth, not a decoy. So I'm going to ask you one question, and if you give me the dance routine, we're done. More silence. She didn't hang up, which was progress. I went in. Who received the recording? Another pause. A breath. Then, my father. That wasn't the answer I expected, but Wolfe had taught me to never react until you're ready to act, so I kept it level. Name? Cal Avery. I whistled. The Cal Avery, 3-term congressman now running a private consultancy from a building with more surveillance than Fort Knox. Yes. Why didn't you say so yesterday? Because this isn't his mess. Then whose is it? Another pause, shorter this time. Mine. I waited. If I've learned anything from Wolfe, it's that a silence held properly is more dangerous than a threat. Finally, she said, my father's email was hacked. The file was sent to him anonymously. It was only a portion, about 3 minutes, snippets of conversations between several men at the club. My father traced the IP address. It came from a local server, bouncing off 2 proxies. That's all he told me. Did he threaten anyone with it? Number. He deleted it, but he didn't know I'd already downloaded it. I raised my eyebrows at the phone. So you have the recording? Some of it. And you came to Ashcroft with it? I didn't come to Ashcroft. I came to a friend who passed it to a contact, who showed it to Ashcroft. That's how it ended up there. I scribbled notes on Wolfe's blotter, which he would hate. And now, I've received a message, a real one, a second file. It came with a threat. If anyone speaks to the press, the rest gets released. Why come to Wolfe now? Her voice was cold. Because whoever is behind this knows I didn't send it. But they also know I have a copy, which means I'm a liability. I nodded to myself. You're being boxed out. Yes. Send us what you have, I said. Wolfe won't move unless he's seen the board. I'll send it. She hung up. I relayed all of this to Wolfe, who was in the plant rooms pruning a particularly moody Miltonia. When I finished, he made a low sound like a cello string being plucked. Cal Avery, he said. Of course, the man who can't keep a secret but insists on having all of them. He's a walking contradiction, I said. So is his daughter. Smart, calculating, and apparently sitting on enough dirt to grow a second city. Mr. Avery, Wolfe said, is not the target. I blinked. You're sure? Yes. He's the decoy. Someone wanted him to see that recording, yes. But more importantly, someone wanted Cordelia to act on it. She was the real intended recipient. Why? Because she's independent, respected, and isolated. Ideal for a chess move. That got my wheels turning. So you're saying someone used her as a channel? Sent the file to Avery knowing she'd find it and take action. Precisely. I sat. That's clever. It's surgical, Wolfe said. I nodded. And now she's panicking. She should be. That afternoon, the file arrived. Cordelia sent it via a secure link with no subject line. Just a timestamp, 1:17:34. Wolfe had me play it on the Brownstones' dedicated machine. Never networked, never mobile. The voices were edited, cut together like puzzle pieces from 3 different conversations. But even without context, you could feel the tension. One voice. If that ledger sees daylight, we'll all have to resign. Another. There's no proof. It's hearsay. Then a third, lower voice. The proof exists. It always existed. The last voice was different. Female, distinct, even though distorted. You should have stayed silent. Click. That was it. Wolfe sat very still. Get Saul, he said finally. We need to know where that recording was made. And how. I called Saul Panzer, the best operative in the business. He arrived an hour later, wearing his usual brown jacket and a look that said he'd already guessed half of what we were going to tell him. After listening to the file twice, Saul leaned back. This was recorded with a directional parabolic mic, he said. Probably from overhead. Could be ceiling mounted. Could be hidden in a chandelier. Wolfe asked, range? 10 to 20 feet. Narrow beam. Whoever did this wasn't improvising. So it was planted. Saul nodded. Deliberately. With prep time. And the woman's voice. Overdubbed, Saul said. Inserted later, meant to sound like part of the same session, but it's not. Wolfe steepled his fingers. You're certain? I'd bet your orchids on it. Wolfe made a face. Find out which room at the Dorchester Club has a chandelier suitable for that kind of installation. Got it. Saul left. I turned to Wolfe. So the woman never made the recording. She just carried it. She was used, Wolfe said. Has a message, a symbol, and now she's been discarded. Wolfe nodded. Which means she may be in danger. I stood. Want me to find her? Number she'll come to us. In fact. He glanced toward the hallway just as the bell rang. I opened the door to find Cordelia standing there, pale, holding a thin envelope in both hands like it was radioactive. She stepped inside without speaking and handed the envelope to me. Inside was a single photograph. A man in a suit, mid-40s, slender, pinched face. He was standing in the Cassiopeia room, talking to the bartender. There was a red circle drawn in ink around his watch. Cordelia's voice was quiet. I found this taped to my apartment door. No note, just that. I showed it to Wolfe. He stared at it for a moment. Then he said, That's not a warning. What is it? She asked. Wolfe's mouth was grim. It's an invitation. Cordelia sat stiff-backed in the red chair, her hands folded too neatly in her lap, as if afraid anything left loose might unravel. The photograph she'd brought lay on Wolfe's desk like a challenge. He hadn't spoken in nearly a full minute. That, for him, was bordering on theatrical. Have you ever seen this man before? Wolfe asked at last. Cordelia nodded. Yes. His name is Graydell. Or at least that's what he went by when we met. Wolfe looked at me. I was already taking notes. Context. He worked for my father, she said. Briefly. He was hired to consult on a digital restructuring project, something to do with encrypted archiving. He vanished 3 months in. No explanation. My father never spoke of it. Did you speak with him? I asked. Twice. The first time he asked for clarification on a project proposal I'd drafted. The second time, he tried to ask me out. Wolfe made a sound halfway between a grunt and a sigh. Charming. Cordelia allowed herself a dry smile. He wasn't the charming type. He was the quiet observer, the man who fades into a corner of the room and listens with both ears. And the watch? I asked. Any significance? I didn't notice anything special at the time, she said. But if it's circled in the photo, it must mean something. Wolfe studied the image again. It's a Montford chronoscope, discontinued in 1998, designed for competitive yacht timers, synchronization of multiple zones, rare and expensive. I raised a brow. So the guy's either a collector, or he wants us to think he's a collector. Quite, Wolfe muttered. Cordelia leaned forward slightly. Who sent this to me, do you think? Wolfe didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached for the envelope the photo had come in, examined the glue line, the texture of the paper, and even took a deep whiff, which made Cordelia blink. Linen finish, a trace of bay rum cologne, and faint ink impressions inside the flap. Someone used this envelope to press down handwriting on another sheet. Can we raise it? I asked. No, Wolfe said. But we may not need to. I looked at him. You've guessed something. I've observed something, he said. Guessing is for those with insufficient data. He stood, barely, and rang for Fritz. Coffee, 3 cups. Strong. That meant Wolfe was settling in. I sat back. Miss Avery, Wolfe said. I'm going to ask you a sequence of questions and I would like precise, concise answers. No flourishes. No omissions. Understood. Does your father currently employ any private contractors with backgrounds in intelligence work? Yes. 2. One in cybersecurity, the other for political risk analysis. Names? I only know the cyber consultant. Raymond Hatch. The other was handled through an intermediary. Have you met Hatch? Once. Briefly. My father keeps him separate from family affairs. And Mr. Dell. Did he work alongside or under Hatch's purview? Cordelia paused. I assumed so, but I don't know for certain. Has your father received any additional threats beyond the audio file? No. Wolfe nodded. Then someone is using you to destabilize your father's circle of influence. You are the pressure point. Fritz brought the coffee in silence, and Wolfe, to Cordelia's credit, didn't elaborate until the man had departed. There is a theory, Wolfe began, sipping, called the cat's paw, using another's hand to pull the hot iron from the fire. You are the cat's paw. Someone wants your father compromised without appearing to compromise him. They leak to you, let you react, then step back and watch the dominoes. But to what end? She asked. Wolfe nodded at me. Archie. I was already on it. The club, the audio, the watch. It's not about leverage. It's about positioning. Someone wants Cal Avery politically neutered before he announces whatever next thing he's planning. Maybe a new consulting client, maybe a backdoor return to public life. Cordelia stiffened. Wolfe saw it. Ah, he said, so he is planning something. She said nothing. Miss Avery, Wolfe continued, we cannot work with half-truths. Either you trust us, or you are wasting both time and potential. Finally, she sighed. My father has been approached by a private investment group. They want to create an advisory board made up of former legislators, a shadow council of influence, effectively. Not illegal, but certainly controversial. The recording, the file, the invitation to Cassiopeia, they're all part of a warning. Don't proceed or more will be revealed, I said. Exactly. I whistled. And who would know enough to pull that off? Cordelia hesitated. Then she said, there was one name my father mentioned. A former rival. Business, not politics. He owns a number of tech-based leverage firms, data vaults, information brokers. A man named Leo Drummond. Wolfe's face went very still. I leaned forward. You know him? I've heard of him, Wolfe said. And what I've heard is distasteful. Mr. Drummond specializes in asymmetrical power dynamics, particularly where information can ruin lives quietly. You think he's behind this? Cordelia asked. No, Wolfe said. I think he's paying someone to be. Cordelia stood. Then what now? You will do nothing, Wolfe said. Nothing? Yes. Let the silence work for you. Archie will do the next part. She glanced at me, then Wolfe, then nodded. As I saw her out, she touched my arm briefly. Be careful, she said. Drummond doesn't play fair. I smiled. Neither do we. After she left, Wolfe called Saul back. When he arrived, Wolfe handed him the photograph. This man, Grey Dell, find everything. Birth certificate, aliases, employment, real estate, school records, offshore activity. I want a life rendered in full. Saul nodded and disappeared like fog. I turned to Wolfe. So what's our angle? Drummond knows Cordelia won't go public, but if he believes someone else will, he must act. You want to smoke him out? No, Wolfe said. I want to bait him. You, Archie, will call the Dorchester Club. You'll request a private reservation in the Cassiopeia room. Use Cordelia's name. Mention a package to be handed off. And if someone's listening, they will come. And if they don't, then we've underestimated them. But we haven't. He closed his eyes and sipped his coffee. We rarely do. And with that, the game moved to its next square, one carefully arranged piece at a time. I made the call to the Dorchester Club just after noon the next day. The woman who answered had a voice like cool marble and a memory for members' preferences that probably included their mistresses' birthdays. I gave her the name Cordelia Avery and requested a private reservation for that evening in the Cassiopeia room. She paused just long enough for a trace of suspicion to tip its hat. Will Miss Avery be attending herself, or should we prepare for a courier? I smiled into the receiver. Let's say it's a handoff. Quiet, no cocktails. There was a silence that told me the message was understood, and that it wasn't the first of its kind. Understood. 10 o'clock. The room will be available. I hung up and reported to Wolfe, who hadn't budged from the office since breakfast and was, at that moment, glaring at a volume on Napoleonic culinary logistics like it had personally insulted him. They bit, I said. Cassiopeia's booked for 10. The courier is me. Wolfe grunted. Pfui. The bait is not you. It is what they believe you're bringing. He didn't look up. You will carry a parcel, weighted, sealed. Something credible. Fritz's fruitcake in a manila envelope. He allowed a flicker of distaste. Not unless you want to cause injury. Fritz, recruited with little enthusiasm, found a cedar box used for cigar storage, which we packed with folded papers, and some spare weight. Old lead letterpress blocks Wolfe hadn't used since Hoover was in office. The box was tied with black ribbon and placed in a satchel with a discreet ink stain on the inside pocket. Just enough authenticity to look like it had passed through multiple hands, each more reluctant than the last. I arrived at the club just before 10, dressed for discretion and ready for whatever version of hospitality the Cassiopeia room decided to offer that evening. The host gave me a glance sharp enough to draw blood, but said nothing. He guided me through the same quiet corridors, past the same uncurious portraits, and deposited me in the room with a nod and the sort of silence that means we are not part of this story, and we would rather not know who is. There were 2 other people already seated, both men, both pretending not to be watching me. One was the bartender, familiar, attentive, already polishing a glass with the determination of a man avoiding eye contact. The other was a new player, late 50s, wire-frame glasses, thinning hair. He wore a suit that had been tailored for a broader man or a younger one. He was reading a newspaper upside down. I chose the corner farthest from both and placed the satchel on the seat beside me, conspicuous enough to draw interest but not suspicion. The minutes passed. At 10:15, the man with the glasses left. He didn't look at me. The bartender stayed, but his polishing had slowed. The room emptied gradually, as if on cue. At 10:30, someone entered who wasn't a member. I say that because she didn't belong. Not in the clothes she wore, a dark raincoat, damp at the shoulders, collar up. Not in the way she moved, quick, purposeful, nervous, and not in her eyes, which darted once to the bag beside me, and then settled nowhere at all. She sat across from me without invitation. "You have it?" she asked, low and fast. "Define it," I said. Her hand slid into her coat. She wasn't pulling a weapon, but I was close enough to smell trouble. "Look," she said, "I don't care who you're working for. If you have the other half, I can make it worth your while." "The other half of what?" "The file." I waited. "That's a trick Wolfe taught me too. Don't fill silences just because you're uncomfortable." The longer I waited, the more she fidgeted. "I know what's in it," she added. "I know what it would do if it got out." "To who?" "To everyone." "Then maybe I should keep it." She leaned forward. "You don't understand. Drummond, he's already moving on this. He has people watching Cordelia, her father, you." That last bit was a bluff. I kept my face blank. "Who are you?" I asked. She hesitated. Then, "My name's Lydia Trent. I used to work for Drummond's risk division, before they started doing this." "Which is?" "Leverage operations, information bait, controlled exposure. Threats designed not to go public, but to get people to move, sell, step down." "And Cordelia's father?" "He's just one of many, but he matters more because he won't be bought." "And the file?" "Drummond has the original, or says he does. But there's a key piece missing, something that makes it all fall apart." "And you think I have it?" "I know you do." Which told me someone had been talking. Maybe not Cordelia. Maybe someone inside the club, or someone who'd been watching from the start. She reached into her coat again and pulled out a USB drive. It was small, nondescript, unmarked. "I'll trade," she said. "You give me what you have. I give you what he doesn't want found." I considered it. Then I smiled. "Here's the thing. I don't make trades. I make reports to someone who hates being lied to." Her eyes widened. She stood, abrupt. "You're not—" But I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She was already halfway to the door when I caught up. "Tell Drummond," I said quietly, "that if he wanted this buried, he should have burned it, because now it's personal." She bolted. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. She'd done exactly what Wolfe wanted, put a name to the fear. I returned to the brownstone a little before midnight. Wolfe was still awake, which meant he'd been expecting something important. I placed the USB on his desk. She said Drummond's building something bigger, not just Cordelia's father, a whole network of power coercion, threats, blackmail, strategic leaks. This was just a test run. Wolfe stared at the drive, then nodded slowly. "Then it is time," he said, "to convene the suspects." "Already?" He looked at me with that immovable calm that meant the next move had already been decided. "Tomorrow at 4. Miss Avery. Mr. Ashcroft. Saul will locate Mr. Dell, and you will ensure Mr. Drummond is invited." "And the file?" He picked up the USB delicately. "This, Archie, is not the end." He stood, fully, and that told me everything I needed to know. "This," he said, "is only the beginning of his undoing." Wolfe had a peculiar way of issuing invitations. He didn't call. He didn't write. He dictated. I spent most of the next morning on the phone, phrasing each request. Mr. Wolfe asks that you attend a meeting at his brownstone this afternoon at 4 p.m. in connection to a matter we discussed previously. In just the right tone. Polite, but not optional. Ambiguous, but with weight. That's the only language high society responds to when it's nervous. Polite gravity. Like death in a silk glove. Ashcroft accepted immediately. His voice was taut, clipped. I pictured him pacing a mahogany-paneled office, re-knotting his tie between calls. He wanted this over with, but not because he wanted resolution. He wanted containment. Cordelia, when I rang her, paused for a full beat before replying. "Is this the endgame?" she asked. "No," I said. "This is Wolfe arranging the board." She didn't ask for details. Just said, "I'll be there." Saul delivered Dell. He'd spent most of the morning tracking him through 2 dummy addresses and 1 real apartment above a bookstore in Soho. When he finally brought him to the brownstone's threshold, Dell looked exactly the way I remembered from the photo. Slight, pale, fastidious. His eyes flitted across the brownstone's entryway as if cataloguing escape routes. He tried small talk on the way in. I gave him nothing. Then came the wild card. Drummond. I had doubts we'd get him. Men like Leo Drummond don't show up when summoned. They send lawyers or shadows. But Wolfe had anticipated that. I placed a call to Drummond's assistant, using a line Wolfe dictated word for word. Mr. Wolfe would rather not name you aloud unless forced. The assistant paused, one of those deliberate silences used only by people who bill by the hour, then said, "He'll come." 4 o'clock. So when the hour struck, they all arrived. One by one. Different faces, same tension. I ushered them into Wolfe's office as instructed. No chit-chat, no separation. Wolfe believed in the power of shared discomfort. Cordelia arrived first, composed but brittle. She wore grey again. Wolfe noticed, of course. Wolfe noticed everything. Ashcroft came next, nodding to Cordelia but not speaking. He took the chair nearest the door as if escape was on his mind. Dell was third. Saul escorted him in and took a position against the wall. Dell sat without being told, folding his hands in his lap like a schoolboy awaiting punishment. Then, finally, Drummond. He entered like a man who assumed he was the smartest in the room and had yet to be proven wrong. Silver hair, perfectly shined shoes, a black coat that probably cost more than the brownstone's monthly utilities. He didn't sit until Wolfe spoke. He just looked at each person in the room, as if reviewing the cast list of a play he'd financed and intended to critique. Wolfe waited until the silence stretched taut, then folded his hands over his stomach and said, "Mr. Drummond, thank you for accepting my invitation. I regret to inform you that your usual methods will not avail you here." Drummond raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware I had usual methods, Mr. Wolfe." "Oh, but you do," Wolfe said. "They are simply not as invisible as you believe." He looked at the group. "This matter," he said, "began with a woman who never sat down. But it was never about her. It was about power and its orchestration. Mr. Ashcroft, you believed this to be a case of reputational sabotage. Miss Avery, you believed it was about silencing a warning. Mr. Dell, you were merely the messenger. And Mr. Drummond," he let that hang. "You mistook your opponent." Drummond smiled. "You're implying I orchestrated this farce." "Number, I'm stating it." Cordelia turned sharply. Ashcroft inhaled. Dell looked like he might faint. Drummond adjusted his cuff. "Prove it." Wolfe's voice was calm. "I don't need to. The point of blackmail, Mr. Drummond, is discretion, leverage, threats that remain implicit." He gestured with one hand toward the satchel I had brought back the night before. "But you overplayed. You sent a second file. You sent a warning. And then, in an act of arrogance, you tried to retrieve what you believed was the missing half." Wolfe nodded toward Dell. You used him to gain trust. You used others to plant recording devices in private club spaces. And you employed Miss Lydia Trent, formerly of your risk division, to act as both lure and cleanup. Drummond's mouth tightened. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, which for him was the equivalent of a sword drawn. But you failed to calculate one thing: intent. Cordelia Avery didn't intend to act on the file. She intended to understand it. That made her unpredictable. Dangerous. He turned to Ashcroft. You were meant to be exposed, but not destroyed. Just weakened. A whisper campaign. A little instability. Enough to prevent you from supporting Mr. Avery's return to influence. Ashcroft bristled. That's absurd. No, Wolfe said. It's meticulous. He turned again. Mr. Drummond, would you like to hear your own voice? For the first time, the man flinched. I inserted the USB into Wolfe's ancient machine and pressed play. This was the part Lydia Trent had given us. It was short, 30 seconds, but effective. Drummond's voice. She's smart, smarter than her father. But if she doesn't drop it, we push. Pressure. She breaks or vanishes. Drummond started to rise. This is fabricated. It's not, Wolfe said sharply. The audio engineer who examined it, a neutral third party, confirms it is untouched. Your voice print matches. Shall I release it to the papers? Drummond froze. Saturday. I thought not, Wolfe said. Cordelia spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet but sure. What happens now? Wolfe regarded her. That is for Mr. Drummond to decide. Drummond turned slowly, like a man measuring the depth of the water before diving in. What do you want? He asked Wolfe. Nothing, Wolfe said. But Miss Avery would prefer that her name and her father's not be mentioned again, publicly or privately. Drummond said nothing. Wolfe leaned back. If you fail to comply, I assure you the consequences will not be reputational. They will be strategic. He gestured to the door. That will be all. They filed out in silence. Even Drummond. I watched them go, then turned to Wolfe. You didn't turn him in. No. You didn't demand anything. I demanded discretion. Think he'll stay quiet? He will, Wolfe said, because for the first time he's been outmaneuvered. He closed his eyes. And men like that never forget when the prey bites back. It was almost 6 when the last coat-hem cleared the brownstone's front door and the silence settled again. Thick, untroubled, and deeply earned. Wolfe hadn't moved. He remained in his chair, eyes closed, fingertips pressed together as if holding an invisible thread. I knew better than to speak first. The man liked his quiet like he liked his sources, intense and uninterrupted. So I let the hush linger, went to the kitchen, and came back with a cold bottle of beer, which I placed silently on the edge of his desk. He opened one eye and nodded. A concession, and a thank you, Wolfe style. I took the red chair. Saturday. Waited. You let him walk, I said finally. No charges, no exposure, no police. Indeed. You sure that was the right call? He opened both eyes now and looked at me like I'd just suggested pouring ketchup on foie gras. Archie, there are cases that require punishment, and there are those that require adjustment. Adjustment, I repeated. Mr. Drummond was not merely acting to gain advantage, Wolfe said. He was engineering silence, institutionalizing fear, turning information into a mechanism of paralysis. That kind of man doesn't respond to prosecution. He responds to exposure only when it's precise, surgical, and leaves him no room to twist. So you left the scalpel in. Precisely, with a polite note that says, next time, it's the liver. I grinned. You always did have a soft spot for indirect revenge. It's not revenge, he said. It's correction. The man must not be allowed to believe his methods are infallible. And Cordelia? She was never the true target, Wolfe said. But her strength made her vulnerable. She believed in quiet control. She now understands the limits of it. I nodded. She handled herself. She did, he admitted. And she learned. That is rare. A knock at the door made me rise automatically. Fritz was done for the day, and Saul had already left, so that left only one possible caller who wasn't unexpected. It was Cordelia, this time in a dark green coat. No papers, no briefcase, no photograph. "I won't stay long," she said as I stepped aside. "I just needed to see if it was really over." "You should know," I said. "We never guarantee endings here, just clarity." She gave me a faint smile and stepped into the office. Wolfe looked up as she entered, gave her a shallow nod, and gestured to the red chair. She didn't sit. She walked once around the office, tracing the bookshelves with her eyes, then stopped beside the globe near the window and rested a hand on it. "Thank you," she said softly. Wolfe sniffed. "Sentiment is wasted on me." "I know," she said. "That's why it's real." That made him grunt. Approval, I think. "Drummond won't retaliate?" she asked. "No," Wolfe said. "He'll vanish, briefly, lick his wounds, then emerge elsewhere with new clients, but he will remember that there are people who cannot be shaped to his liking. People like my father. People like you." She smiled then. Not large, but real. "I should go," she said. Wolfe gave a small bow of his head. "Miss Avery," she turned at the door. "Do you ever feel sorry for men like him?" Wolfe considered that. "Number, but I do feel sorry for their clients." She left. I closed the door behind her and leaned back against it. "You liked her," I said. "I respected her," he corrected. "Same thing, the way you do it." He didn't respond. I came back to my seat, took my own beer from the drawer where I keep emergencies and cracked it open. "You know," I said, "you never told me why you took this case in the first place." Wolfe picked up his glass. "Because," he said, "it disturbed the brownstone." "Sure, but they all do. Usually takes more than a man standing upright and cryptic." "This one stood," he said, but said nothing. "And that's what got you?" "No," Wolfe said. "It's what he didn't do. He didn't plead. He didn't pretend. He merely pointed toward the web and waited to see who else was caught in it." "And that was enough?" "No," Wolfe said. But then Cordelia Avery walked in. I sipped. She cracked it. She revealed it. Silence stretched again. Not awkward, just complete. Dinner was late that night. Fritz served pheasant in a plum reduction that somehow managed to be humble and imperial at the same time. I didn't ask how. I didn't want to know. I just ate. Wolfe ate slower than usual, contemplative. When the plates were cleared and coffee served, he leaned back and said, to no one in particular, "Leverage, like salt, is best when you don't taste it." I looked at him. "Philosophical?" "Culinary," he replied. I stood. "Well, we've untangled secrets, outfoxed a manipulator, and survived a social club with the personality of a loaded gun. I say we call that a Thursday." Wolfe merely grunted. I headed upstairs to file my notes and write the report I'd never actually mailed to any client. Not this time. This one went into the drawer with the others that ended not in arrests, but in restored balances. Just before I switched off the light, Wolfe called up the stairs. "Archie." "Yeah? Do not allow anyone into this house next week." "Why?" He paused. "Because I intend to pretend none of them were ever here." I grinned. "Consider it done." The brownstone, for the moment, was at peace. And the guest who never sat down? She'd left behind more than trouble. She'd left behind a lesson, and Wolfe, as ever, had been ready for the test. It was the next morning when the call came, slicing through the quiet like a bone saw through veal. I was halfway through my coffee and halfway through not caring about anything when the phone rang. I expected it to be Saul, or maybe Cordelia, calling with an echo of gratitude. People often find themselves disoriented after Wolfe's particular brand of justice. Instead, the voice on the other end was clipped, British and unfamiliar. "Mr. Goodwin, this is Stephen Symes. I represent the Dorchester Club's Internal Ethics Committee." I nearly choked on my toast. "You have one of those?" A long pause. "We'd like to meet." "Regarding?" There was a soft breath of hesitation. "Mr. Ashcroft has stepped down. Without explanation, he cited personal reasons and, uncharacteristically, offered no rebuttal when asked about rumors of misconduct." "Well," I said, "that's what happens when your secrets are pointed at by smarter people. We were told you and Mr. Wolfe might be able to clarify certain impressions that have begun to circulate." Wolfe, overhearing from the office, barked my name. I cupped the receiver and called back. A man from the Dorchester's Clean Conscience Brigade. "Hang up," Wolfe said flatly. I returned to the call. "We appreciate your enthusiasm, Mr. Symes, but I'm afraid we're all out of clarity for the week." "I must insist." "You may," I said, and hung up. I stepped into Wolfe's office. "Another ripple?" I said. "They're inevitable," he replied. "Ashcroft's resignation will be noted but not investigated. He's too insulated to fall, but no longer useful enough to protect. That is as far as their curiosity will go." "Still," I said, "you don't usually get post-case inquiries from old money enclaves." Wolfe grunted. "The Dorchester is not disturbed by corruption. It is disturbed by inefficiency. The moment Ashcroft ceased being useful, he became expendable." "And Drummond?" "He will lie low. A man like that has no loyalty, only tempo. He will wait until enough people forget, then resume." "You sound disappointed." "I am not. I am realistic. Some weeds grow back. You do not mourn the pruning. You keep the shears ready." That's about as close to a grim worldview as Wolfe ever allowed himself to express before breakfast. I returned to my desk, sorted notes, filed Cordelia's letter into a folder labeled Miscellaneous, Resolved, but Curious. I was just about to make a sandwich when Saul Panzer rang the bell. He came in wearing the look he saves when a case refuses to die politely. "Got something?" he said. "Or rather, something got me." Wolfe looked up. "Explain." "I was followed this morning." Wolfe narrowed his eyes. "By whom?" "No idea. Professional. Kept distance. I doubled back twice. Took a taxi to nowhere. Still couldn't shake them. Then I found this." Saul reached into his coat and produced a narrow envelope, wedged under my windshield when I stopped for coffee. I took it, opened it. Inside, a single photograph. Grainy, night vision style. It showed me at the Cassiopeia room. Seated, talking to Lydia Trent, written on the back in block caps, "You didn't find her. She found you. Still think this is over?" I handed it to Wolfe without a word. He read it, made a sound like a kettle just short of boiling, and tossed it onto his blotter. "Irritating," he said. "Who took it?" I asked. "Someone with access. The club or Drummond's former people. Possibly both. So it's not over." "No," Wolfe said. "But it's changed." Saul sat. "What's the play?" Wolfe sipped his beer, before noon, which meant he was annoyed. "This isn't a threat," he said. "It's a test. Whoever sent this wants to know if we're still watching, if we're alert. They're not continuing the plan. They're probing the silence left behind." "Drummond?" I asked. "Doubtful. His style is grander. This is personal. This is Lydia." That got my attention. "You think she's gone rogue?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that she realized something during our little performance, that with Drummond cornered, she became the most dangerous piece on the board. A free agent with information. More than that," Wolfe said. "A narrative. She can say whatever she likes about what happened. She can shape the events. She has the footage, the voice recordings, the club logs. And a motive? Possibly. Or possibly not. She may simply enjoy being the last one standing. Wolfe rarely spoke in speculative terms. If he was doing it now, it meant we were dealing with a wild variable. I stood. "Want me to find her?" "No," Wolfe said. "She wants to be found. Let her make another move. And if she does something stupid, then she'll no longer be a curiosity," Wolfe said. "She'll be a problem." We waited. 2 days passed. Nothing. Then, on the third morning, a letter arrived. No postmark. Hand-delivered. Fritz found it wedged into the root ball of Wolfe's prized Paphiopedilum orchid. That earned an expletive in Montenegrin. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. Typed. No signature. "You did well, but you missed the last scene. There was no leverage, only rehearsal. What you interrupted was not a crime, but a performance. Ask Cordelia what her father was really preparing for. Ask her about the other board, the one not built from politicians, but from watchers." Wolfe read it, then folded it once and set it, aflame with a long match. "I've had enough performances," he said, "and enough letters. So we drop it, we document it, then we wait. And that's where it rests. For now." Cordelia never replied to my last message. Ashcroft retreated into a conference circuit and re-emerged as a strategic ethics advisor, which is rich but not surprising. Drummond's offices in New York were shuttered 2 weeks later. He issued a public statement about restructuring. No one asked why. And Lydia? Nothing. She vanished. No calls, no whispers, no trail. Just a single sentence echoing in Wolfe's office like the residue of a spell. There was no leverage, only rehearsal. Wolfe doesn't like riddles, not unless he's the one dealing them out. But me, I think I liked that one. Because it meant the game wasn't over, just paused. And in the world we live in, that's sometimes the best kind of ending. The brownstone was quiet again. No envelopes tucked into orchids. No threats couched in poetic riddles. No clients knocking with trembling hands or cryptic motives. It was, for once, just the sound of normal. Fritz preparing roast squab in the kitchen, the low hum of the radiator, and Wolfe's steady breathing as he read a volume on early Roman aqueduct engineering with what looked to be genuine pleasure. It had been a week since the last message. A week since Wolfe had burned Lydia Trent's final communique with all the ceremony of a man flushing the last dead fish down the bowl. And in that week, nothing had happened. Nothing further, I should say. Ashcroft's resignation had gone public, Cordelia had made herself unavailable, and Leo Drummond, surprise, surprise, was reported to have relocated to a property outside Zurich. Apparently, Swiss neutrality applies to sins as well as banking. But despite the calm, something hadn't settled. Not with Wolfe, and not with me. I found him that afternoon in the plant rooms, seated between 2 tiers of slipper orchids, holding a pruning tool he hadn't used for 15 minutes. He was staring at the far wall. That's usually my cue. "Still thinking about Lydia?" I asked. "No," he said, thinking about what we didn't see. I sat on the stool opposite him and crossed my arms. "Meaning?" "She used the phrase, 'only rehearsal,'" Wolfe said. "Twice. First in person, then in writing. It's a deliberate choice. She wanted us to feel like we interrupted something, not just exposed it. Isn't that what we did?" He looked up. "Archie, what if the file wasn't a threat? What if it wasn't the point at all?" I frowned. "Go on." "What if the whole thing, Cordelia receiving the file, Ashcroft panicking, Drummond maneuvering, was meant to simulate something? Not to execute blackmail, but to stage it, observe it, time it." That's a lot of trouble just to run a simulation. Yes, Wolfe said. Unless someone was watching more than the people in the room. I got it then, and it chilled me. You think this was a test? Yes. For whom? He set down the shears. For us, among others. I stared at him. You think someone was watching how you would respond? Not just me, Wolfe said. You, Saul, Cordelia, Ashcroft, everyone. This wasn't about leverage. This was about seeing how leverage moves through people. Who caves, who resists, who improvises, who breaks, and who wins. Wolfe nodded. Exactly. I sat back. And Lydia? She was the conductor, or perhaps only the metronome. Either way, she wasn't acting alone. You think she's part of a larger group? Or a pilot program, Wolfe said grimly. One that tests soft power mechanisms before deployment in larger fields. Government, finance, influence, a psychological rehearsal. As she said, and we passed. He gave me a long look. She left us standing, that's all we know. Silence settled again. I didn't like it. I don't enjoy the idea of being part of someone's experiment, I muttered. Nor do I, Wolfe said. But awareness is power, and now we are aware. I stood. Then maybe we should return the favor. Wolfe arched a brow. You wish to find her? Number one, I want her to know we're looking, even if we're not. Wolfe considered. A subtle message. Exactly. Let her feel the breath on her neck. He closed his eyes. Very well. Make an inquiry. Nothing overt, just enough to stir the surface. I nodded and left the plant rooms. That night I placed 3 phone calls, one to a contact in the bureau, one to a journalist friend who owed me 2 favors and a bottle of rye, and one to a woman I knew from my brief and ill-fated attempt at dating within the intelligence community. I didn't name Lydia. I didn't even name Drummond. I simply asked the same question, tailored to each. What do you know about rehearsal programs involving information warfare? 2 of them said, nothing. One of them, my ex, the spook, said, who's asking? Which meant she did know something. I thanked her and hung up. The next morning, a manila envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single page, printed in clean serif font. No letterhead. Some stories are told in whispers. Others are rehearsed until they're ready for the stage. You stopped the rehearsal. Well done. Just be aware. We're writing the script as we go. That was it. No signature, no threats, just acknowledgement. Wolfe read it, set it on the desk, poured himself a beer at 9:30 in the morning. You're taking that as a compliment? I asked. As a warning, he said, which is close enough. I returned to the office, put the page in our file labeled contingencies:political/private. Then I poured myself a second cup of coffee and sat, waiting to feel like the world had rebalanced. It didn't. But that's the thing about living in Wolfe's world. You learn not to expect balance. You learn to look for patterns in the imbalance. And sometimes you get lucky enough to stop something before it goes live. That evening, over a dinner of duck à l'orange, Wolfe spoke for the first time in hours. She won't come back. I chewed, swallowed. Lydia? He nodded. Her work is done. For now. But the system behind her, that's only paused. So what do? We eat, Wolfe said. We read, we prepare. That's it. For now. The next day passed with no letters, no envelopes, no clients, and the brownstone finally exhaled. I spent the afternoon filing everything, cross-indexing names, dates, incidents. Wolfe didn't want a report written, but I did it anyway, just for me. A full timeline, labeled The Guest Who Never Sat Down, filed under Unclosed Cases, Psychological. Because that's what this one was. Not solved, just suspended. And as I turned out the lights that night, I thought again of Lydia's words. You didn't find her. She found you. Wolfe had told her once that sentiment was wasted on him, but I think, just this once, it stuck. Because we hadn't beaten her. Not really. We'd only convinced her to let us live past the curtain call. And for now, that was enough. It was 2 weeks later, after the last of the shadows had retreated, when Cordelia Avery returned. No envelope preceded her, no call, no hint. She simply arrived one grey afternoon at the stroke of 3, carrying a single, leather-bound folder and the expression of a woman who had made peace with knowing too much. Fritz answered the door, admitted her with the same silent grace he reserved for unexpected nobles, and gestured her into the office. Wolfe was already in his chair. He hadn't left it all day. I joined from the hall and closed the door behind us, keeping my notebook tucked beneath one arm, mostly for show. Wolfe wasn't expecting this, but he wasn't surprised either. A fine distinction, but one I've learned to read on his face. "Miss Avery," he said, "have you come to sit or to stand again?" This time, she sat. She placed the folder on his desk and looked at him. "You were right," she said. Wolfe didn't gloat. He never does when someone uses that tone, the tone of realization, not surrender. "I asked my father," she continued, "about the other board, the one Lydia hinted at, the one not made of politicians." "And," Wolfe said. Cordelia opened the folder and slid the top page forward. It was a list, names, dates, titles, all scrubbed clean of obvious context, but laced with subtext if you knew how to look. "Surveillance investments," she said. "Private firms, pattern analysts, retired intelligence officers now operating advisory fronts." Lydia was right. My father wasn't building a return. He was building a mirror. "A counter-network," Wolfe murmured. She nodded. He said it was insurance, that the world had become too unpredictable. That influence wasn't enough anymore. You had to see first, move faster, stay quieter. Wolfe studied the list without touching it. "So Lydia knew," he said. "Yes," Cordelia said. "She was recruited by someone in the outer circle, not directly by my father, but by a proxy. She was meant to vet vulnerabilities, observe how key players behaved under artificial stress, test moral pressure, threat of exposure. She didn't know the whole plan, just her role. And when we exposed Drummond, she improvised. She wanted to see if you could adapt, if you'd strike or retreat, if you'd follow her when the trail went cold." "She watched," I said. "The whole time?" Cordelia nodded. "She watched us all." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And your father?" "Pulled the plug. After the test ran too long, he said it showed more than he wanted, that once you know how easily trust collapses, it becomes hard to use it again." Wolfe grunted. It always was. She leaned forward slightly. "There was one more thing. Lydia left something before she disappeared. A message for me." She reached into her coat and drew out a slip of heavy paper, unfolded it carefully. I leaned in. "You passed the test, but the test wasn't for you. It was for him. He's still watching, but now, so are you." "She meant my father," Cordelia said, "but I think she meant someone else too." Wolfe let the paper rest on the desk, his fingers not quite touching it. "She may have meant the person behind the proxy," he said, "the one even your father doesn't fully control." Cordelia stood. "So what now?" Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment. "Nothing," he said, "because the ones who play games like these don't return for encore performances. They disappear. Recast. Rename. But you'll be ready," she said. Wolfe opened his eyes. "Yes." She looked at both of us. "Thank you." Wolfe said nothing, but this time, as she turned to leave, he did something unexpected. He stood. Not fully, just enough to shift the balance of the room. A gesture, a mark of rare respect. She left without another word. After the door closed, I looked at him. "Well," I said. That was the first time she sat down and you stood up. She earned it, Wolfe said. I nodded. Do you think her father will keep building? I asked. Wolfe shook his head. Number. The moment Cordelia saw what he was doing, it changed. She became his conscience. He will hesitate now. And Lydia? Gone, Wolfe said. For good, if she's wise. But she left us a gift. What's that? He sat again. She reminded us that even watchers have blind spots. I grinned. So we watch the watchers. Indeed. That night we didn't discuss it again. Fritz served lamb braised in rosemary and lemon. Wolfe devoured it like it might be his last chance to enjoy a meal in peace, which in this line of work is never a certainty. After dinner, I went to the office, poured myself a drink, and pulled the file. The guest who never sat down, I added one more page. A closing entry. No revelations. No names. Just a note. Some chairs are left empty for a reason, and some guests never sit because they're not here to rest. They're here to remind you that you're still in the game. I closed the file, filed it under completed cases. Intact but incomplete. And I turned off the lights. Because for once, we hadn't won by proving who did it. We'd won by showing that sometimes the sharpest justice is simply noticing, and that, in Nero Wolfe's house, is enough. 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 Is enough.